Hey everybody, welcome. We are so glad that you're here today for the very last week of our Hope Project message series. I want to say way to go, those of you who have hung in there with us all of these weeks. In fact, if you were with us every week of the Hope Project, I'd love for you right now just to go ahead and give yourself a high five. Give yourself a fist bump, say, I was here every week. Maybe you got 6 out of 7, way to go, proud of you. Also, I want to encourage those of you who have started a daily time alone with God for our 40 days of encouragement. I'm so proud of you for taking that step. This is a great time to keep that habit going of reading the Bible and praying. And so many of you made a very significant decision to host and lead a group. There has perhaps never been a time for us as a church where groups have been more important than right now while we're scattered to stay connected in community. So thanks to those of you who hosted groups, who led groups. We're very excited about continuing groups in the fall. In fact, we had more people engaged in summer groups than any time in our church's history, and we're praying and working towards doing the exact same thing this fall. So you can start planning. Some of you maybe even would decide that you'd like to host or lead a group this fall to make a difference in somebody else's life. And so today, we're celebrating all that God did over the last 40 plus days. And then we're looking forward to the future. Some of you have asked, what's next after this incredible Hope Project? Well, next week, we kick off a brand new series called How to Echo. And this series is all about your life making a difference. You know, as things have changed around us, God's mission for your life has not shifted. In fact, never has there been a time where what we do as a church is more important than what we do now. We exist, we say, to urgently lead people to say yes to Jesus and passionately follow him. People need the hope that Jesus has for their lives. And we're going to talk about how do we re-engage with our mission when things look different around us, when life is shifting and changing. And next week, as we do kick off this brand new series, it's a vision series for us as a church. It's the official day that Crossroads and Echo.Church become one church. So we're super pumped about that. 25 years of faithfulness of God's work has been displayed through Crossroads, and we're celebrating that faithfulness. Pastor Paul and Karen and their hard work and the team there at Crossroads. So I want to encourage you to be back next week for this monumental, historical moment for us as a church, and we celebrate what God's going to do in the future through our lives together. Also, we're going to do something fun next month. I'll give you a little sneak peek. Next month, we're going to do something called Fab 5 August. And for everybody who's here every week and you check in, we got some cool Echo swag we're going to send your way. In fact, right now would be a great opportunity to let us know how you're doing and test out the check-in feature. In fact, every week we do this. We want to know how you're doing, how we can pray for you. And I do wonder, as you check in and you let us know that you're here with us today, as you wrestle through that question, how are you doing? Like if we were to sit down for a cup of coffee and I were to say, how are you doing today? What would be the emotion that you would use to describe how you're doing? Now, if you sat down with me and you asked me how I'm doing, I would tell you, man, this season has been longer than I expected it to be. I was on a call with pastors this week, group of good friends, and we all pastor across the country, different churches, and that question was asked, how you doing? And everybody said the same thing. Man, this is a struggle. This is hard. I'm exhausted. This is harder than I thought it would be. I was thinking this week that this season for me has felt a lot like wearing a weighted vest. I don't know if any of you guys have ever put one of these things on. This one, I believe, is about 40 to 60 pounds, and people wear these things when they work out. I don't know why you would do that, why you'd put more weight on while you're lifting weights. But it just makes everything that you do a little bit harder. Like if you were to walk around your house with a weighted vest on, you could do the normal things, but you'd feel that weight. This season to me feels a little bit like I got a weighted vest on. It's like somebody said to me, you got to do all the same things. You got to lead a church, but you can't come into a building physically and meet. You got to get your work done, but now you have kids at home while you get your work done. You got to go to the grocery store, but now when you go to the grocery store, you got to wait in a long line 6 feet apart before you can go into the store. All these things that we used to do, but now we have to do them a little bit differently. It feels like you're doing it with a weighted jacket on. And maybe even a lot of things that you enjoyed, that you brought you pleasure, like going on dates with your spouse. Man, how many of you guys miss those days when you could just go to a restaurant and sit down and have a good meal? And Now you're not getting any of that at the same level that you were. And then somebody said to you in the midst of that, actually, you're going to have to carry some weight too. There are going to be struggles that you had that you didn't have. There's going to be anxiety about the future. There's going to be worry about your job. Maybe you lost your job, so you got to worry about your money and how it's going to come together. And now the stimulus money from the government's run out. And so all these things that are weighing heavy on you. And then somebody said to you, well, you got to walk a little while. It's going to be a couple months of this. It's going from March to April to May to June to July. And you thought to yourself, well, at least when I get to July, this whole thing's going to be over. And then you got to July and you started looking at the data and things began to change. You saw the news reports, it's going back up. And then somebody said, actually, kids are not going back to school. So you have to walk another mile. And here you are walking and you have no idea when this is going to finish. It's almost like hope deferred, as the proverb says, make a heart sick. I can carry weight if I know how far I have to carry it, but if you keep telling me I got to keep going, I'm not sure. And the question so many people are wrestling through is, how long can I keep carrying this weight? Like, how long can I hold these weights in my hands and not drop them on my feet? How long can I stay at home with my siblings when they drive me crazy? How long can I continue to do my schoolwork when my parents are right in the room and they're just annoying me and I cannot focus? How long can I do this? That's the question that so many of us are wrestling through. And that's the question I want to wrestle through with you today. Because 1 Peter addresses the question of the weight that we carry, the anxiety, the worry, the stress that weighs heavy on all of us. In 1 Peter chapter 5, we're going to take a few moments today to look at some of Peter's final words to the churches. And I've loved this book. I've loved our time together. I loved writing the journal, the 40-day journal, because I felt like I got to know Peter at a deeper level. And today I want you to imagine, as we unpack Peter's words, I want you to imagine that you're sitting around a campfire with Grandpa Peter. And he has a few final words of encouragement for you. He wants to tell you from the bottom of his heart what is most important to the heart of God. And as he writes these words from deep within his soul, he writes them as a friend of Jesus. He writes them as one who had been with Jesus in the inner circle. He was one of the 3 inner circle followers of Jesus. And he understood, much like you would understand if you had spent time with a good friend for a long period of time, he understood the heart of God. And as he writes these words, his final push through the end of 1 Peter, he writes these words to a group of people that had continued to suffer. They feared for their lives, and they struggled. And he wants to give them one last burst of hope, one last burst of peace in the midst of their anxiety. 1 Peter chapter 5, beginning in verse 5. He says, in the same way, you who are younger must accept the authority of the elders. Now, I want to stop for a second and recognize that in our culture, diminishing of emphasis on people who are older. In fact, now in our culture, compared to cultures previously, it's almost like the older you get, the less significant people act like you are. But I want to encourage you, even from this passage of Scripture, that those who've gone before us have wisdom that we need. Those of us who are in our 30s and 20s and teenage years, that when you make a decision or when you pray, it's so important to get wisdom from somebody who's gone before you. Find a grandpa, find an uncle, find an aunt, find a grandma, somebody who has gone into future seasons and has lived the life you want to live. Now, Peter's not talking about bad grandpa who's gone through 14 divorces and wants to give you counsel on your marriage. He's talking about people who have lived godly, wise lives. And I've found that I get different advice from people in their 60s and 70s that have walked through. In fact, I want to say thanks to those of you who are the generation that has lived well, who's a part of Echo. It's been fun watching our church become a multi-generational church, not just multi-ethnic, but multi-generational. And if you're grateful for somebody who's in a former generation, put it in the chat right now. Thank somebody who's gone before you that has impacted your life. Peter says, get your wisdom from them. And all of you, not just old or not just young, all of you should dress yourselves in humility as you relate to one another. And we walk around with clothes on in our relationships. There are ways that we relate to one another, and Peter says that the shirt I want you to put on is the shirt of humility, that would be the clothes that you wear as you communicate with one another. And I want you to see from this passage how he pits humility against pride. The shirt that is, the humble shirt is way lighter than the prideful shirt. It's a lot easier to carry that over the long haul. And then he launches into the heart of God. He says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Notice how he uses hands in this, that God, he stands in opposition to pride, and then he welcomes those who are humble. He continues his thought by saying, so humble yourselves under the mighty power of God. That God's hand is strong, it's mighty, but humility, submission to authority brings you under that protective, strong hand of God. And at the right time, that same hand that you have humbled yourself under, God will lift you up in honor. Give all your worries and cares to God, for he cares for you. Now watch as he concludes. We're actually going to come back to that previous verse, but I want you to see here this line of thought that he says, stay alert. Watch out for your great enemy. A couple weeks ago, I was on a hike by myself, and I had seen a sign that there were mountain lions in the area. And when I saw that sign, it changed my hike. I was peaceful, I was chill, I was enjoying the walk, and now all of a sudden, everything that moves through the woods, I am on high alert. And Peter is saying that there is an enemy that is on the prowl. Stay alert. In fact, watch out for him, the devil. He prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for somebody to devour. You have an enemy who is out to destroy you. He wants to destroy your health, your mindset, your sanity. He wants to take away the life that God has created you to live. He could care about nothing that relates to success or fruitfulness in your life. His whole goal is to devour you. His desire is to destroy everything that is good in your life. And when you operate through the lens of understanding that God is at work and the enemy is at work, all seasons of your life. In fact, the biggest problem that you're facing right now is far more spiritual than you think it is. Your anxiety is far more spiritual than you ever thought possible. Your struggle with your children or your parents or your finances, there is a spiritual element. The enemy is constantly at work. And what pride does, Peter is saying, is pride makes you unable to see the enemy's work around you. Pride makes you so focused on the wrong things so that the enemy takes you out. You better believe in the midst of this fight for racial justice in our society, Satan is at work and God is at work. God is trying to bring justice and reconciliation and restoration and equality. The enemy is trying to bring anger and hatred and division, and both are at work. You better believe that in the midst of COVID-19 and this whole season of life, that Satan is at work and God is at work. Satan's trying to put fear and anxiety and worry and despair in the heart of humans, and God is at work trying to help us realize we don't need buildings for his kingdom to go forward, that we can continue to reach people, that we can live with hope in the midst of uncertainty, that our lives can continue to make a difference. And all of these are constantly at play in your life. God's at work and Satan is at work. And your heart attitude, your humility or your pride is the key element to whether or not you walk with peace in the midst of this season. It's the key ingredient of whether or not you're able to stand strong in the midst of the enemy's attack. So stand strong because he wants somebody to devour. Now I want to come back to the thing that Peter said last. And I want to zero in on this statement. God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. God opposes pride, but he welcomes, he blesses, he lifts up those who live with humility. And I wonder, just kind of coming back to the life of Peter, I wonder if Peter at all had in mind when he talked about Satan and his attempts to destroy, if at all Peter in his mind had Judas right there and thinking about the difference. See, Judas betrayed Jesus and Peter betrayed Jesus. I mean, Peter denied Jesus. And both of them, their story went so differently. Judas, he betrays Jesus and goes out and hangs himself. Peter denies Jesus gets restored and goes on to be this mighty man of God that he uses in a powerful way. What was the difference? The difference was pride and humility. One acknowledged their sin, one acknowledged their weakness, the other stood in continual defiance until his death. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And I wonder, as you wrestle through a verse like this, when you hear the word pride, what comes to mind? Now, for many of us, pride is a positive word. You know, say things like, I'm proud of you. I say this to my kids all the time. This is very different than what God means or the scripture intend here. The best word would be the word arrogance. And if I were to ask you, are you arrogant? What would you say? I know very few of us would say yes to the question, are you arrogant? But arrogance has a lot of different faces to it. It has a lot of different ways that it exposes itself in our lives. I remember when Stacy and I, we were in graduate school, and we started doing student ministry together. We were in this church. There's about 1,500 people coming on a weekly basis, and they didn't have a middle school ministry at the time. And the youth pastor who oversaw all of it said, hey, we're looking for somebody to lead out in students who could focus on middle school students. It was a great experience. So Stacy and I, 17, 18 years old, we prayed about it. We were good friends, kind of dating at the time. And I came back to the leader and said, hey, Stacy and I will lead this thing together. And so we started into leading student ministry. We planned these big events. We saw lives change. The ministry doubled in size over a period of time. And I started getting a little bit excited and feeling like God had found a good pick in me to serve at this church. I remember on one particular occasion, we had done an event and we had like hundreds of students show up for it. And I was starting to get frustrated and disgruntled with the pastor, or at least the staff. And I felt like they weren't changing things fast enough. They weren't moving as fast as I thought that they should move. And I had a conversation with Stacy on the way home from our church back to college one time, and I said, you know, if I were the pastor, I'd do a better job than this guy. I remember saying it. I mean, it sounds so bad to say it right now. And maybe if Dr. Lefko, if you're watching this at any point, I love you, and I could not have done a better job than you were doing. You're a great leader, great man of God. But I remember at the time, my arrogance had crept in. And so God had this funny way of moving me from there after college to Texas, where we went to grad school, and we started a church, and I got the opportunity to be in charge. And guess what? I realized it was way harder than I ever anticipated. And so much of the wave that we had experienced in student ministry was, number one, the leadership of the church, that I got to build something on their wave. I got to ride the wave that they had created, and I got to be in a community that had a desperate need. There were a ton of young students, and my arrogance led me to believe if I were in charge, I would do a better job. I wonder if you've ever thought that before. If I were the one making the decisions, I wouldn't do this. I wouldn't start that program. I wouldn't have made that decision. I would have given more emphasis to this or less emphasis to that. And you know what happens sometimes in an organization? It's kind of like one time we went for a family picture with Stacy's extended family, and we had her sister and their kids, and her sister-in-law or brother and their kids, and our family, and then the extended family with grandma and grandpa, and they all sat down to look at the picture to decide what family picture do we get. And everybody looks at their family picture, not the whole family, to see what's the best picture. My kids, their eyes are open in that one. Your kids' eyes are closed. I want the one where my kids' eyes are open. Who makes the decision? Grandma makes the decision because she sees the whole picture. And some of you, you think you do a better job, but you're only focused on your little angle, your little slice of the big picture. Maybe this is not your issue. Maybe you've thought to yourself, I'm right, they're wrong. Right now in our country, we are so divided over people on the left and right, and maybe thinking they would do it better, but I'm the one who has the right way of seeing it. You go to the East Coast, which I did for my grandma's funeral in June. You come back here to the West, and the people in the East or the Midwest are not handling it. They see everybody in the West handling it the wrong way. We see people in the Midwest or Southeast handling it where it's like, well, we're right, you're wrong. And this mindset is dividing us as a country. At the core, it's pride. At the core, it's arrogance. At the core, It's removing the hand, the faithfulness, the favor of God. It's sin. When I look at somebody else, Jesus said it kind of like this: don't take the speck out of your brother's eye when you got a log in your own eye. And it's pride that separates us from one another. Another one is, you can't tell me what to do. I've noticed that this creeps into children, and actually, it creeps into adults as well, doesn't it? You know anybody? I'm sure you haven't, but you know anybody who said, I'm not putting my face mask on? You can't tell me what to do. I'm not wearing a mask. It's surprising to me how much pride you can see right now in us, in our country, in our response. So many places all over the world, their data, their cases continue to go down, and Americans, we're going to do it our way, and our cases continued to go up. It's like it was changing, and then the data changed, because you can't tell me what to do. I'm not trying to make a political statement here. I'm just saying that there is pride in us. There is pride in our nation. There's pride in our hearts. And it oftentimes puts us in a place where that haughtiness that starts when we are 2, 3, 4 years old, you can't tell me what to do, creeps in, and it grows over the course of time. Final one is, I can't afford to slow down. And I want to say that this is the one that I believe is most prevalent in our church and most prevalent in our community. It's the belief that I cannot stop long enough to slow down and catch my breath. It's like somebody gave you the weights and you said to yourself, man, if I drop these weights, everything's going to fall apart. And maybe even to some degree, if you don't clean up the house and do the dishes afterwards, or you don't get that project in on time, or you don't do it with your school when school starts, you're not studying as hard, there is going to be a consequence to it. But there's a part of me that wonders when it comes to our ability to embrace our limits. If our inability to embrace our limits, especially here in the Bay Area, flows out of the arrogance that makes us think that we are not finite beings, that we can continue to create technology and innovate at a level or in a way that makes us our own gods, that we can exceed our own limits, our boundaries, that in our minds we're immortal. In our minds we can create robots that can eventually make our bodies go for another 100 years, that I can't stop, I can't slow down, I can't rest. And maybe you have told yourself this lie and you're carrying the weight and you feel like you can't rest. And I want to encourage you today that perhaps underneath of it is this warped perspective, a warped mindset that leads you to believe wrongly that if you let it go, life is going to fall apart way more than it will. I want to encourage you. Peter, through his words, connected humility and peace. Peter, through his words, helped the early churches understand that there was a direct correlation, a pathway between humility and being able to live with tremendous amounts of peace spiritually. A couple of weeks ago, I should say about a month ago, I was exhausted. I had gone through this whole season, and this is not to make your season feel lighter or your weight feel lighter than mine. I'm sure we could all share stories, but we have been leading the church, we've been making difficult decisions. It had been months of this. On top of all that, I decided to write the 40-Day Hope Project, which ended up being the length of a nonfiction book. We launched a podcast. We're making big decisions about the church. We're dealing with stuff at home, and I was flat exhausted. Then my grandma passed away. Before she passed away, she's a feisty woman. She said to me, "You're going to preach my funeral, and you're going to do a good job." And so I felt the weight of that. I went home to Michigan. We had more challenges with our family. We were exhausted. I'm dealing with the weight of so many of my family members not knowing Jesus, his love, and all of this had built up. And I was like, I have got to get a break. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, if I slow down, things are going to fall apart. And I think that God spoke to me in a way that he wants to speak to you today to say, you can slow down. So I went away to Hermitage. I'll show you some pictures. New Camaldoli Hermitage, just south of Big Sur. And it's located on the what it looks like there. The first couple of days I went with Stacy, but unfortunately you're not allowed to talk. Complete silence, which is hard for an extrovert. So I talked a lot to myself and a lot to Jesus. I could go for long walks and I could talk out loud there. I did a lot of prayer, Bible study, reading. Stacy was with me for 2 days on the front end. It was awesome. We had a great time together, but we kind of broke the rules a little bit with talking. And then the last 2 days, Felipe came with me. I had some time in the middle by myself, and God used it in a huge way. When you're alone, you take selfies like this because you get bored. But it was a very, very phenomenal time for me to get refueled and to get my heart recentered with God, to slow down, and to really ask God, what is next for my life? What is next for our church? Then after that, we went on a family vacation. We went to Tahoe. As you can see in my family, not everybody always is happy. We sometimes take 5 shots to get one that is 80% happy. And the kids, Stacy and I got to spend good time together with each other. It was just a great opportunity for us to breathe and to rest and to let God continue to lead our lives and be reminded that we are not God, that we are finite beings, that we need His help, that we need His hand to continue to lead. And we did have one moment where the kids got along, and we made sure to put it on a picture so that you could see that every once in a while there is hope for us, for all of us, even for Cademan and Karis, that they can get along for a picture. So, but today I wonder for you if you have bought into the lie that you can't slow down. And that lie is causing you to carry weight that God did not intend for you to carry. And I want you to see in this passage the secret that Peter gives to us. See, he comes to this idea. He says, humble yourselves under the mighty power of God, that there is a power available to you, and at the right time, He'll lift you up. Give all of your worries and cares to God because He cares for you. It's impossible to give your worries and cares to God if you're still trying to control your life, if you're still trying to be in charge. And I want to leave you with this thought. You can't receive God's help until you release control of your life to Him. There are some things in your life that God is asking you to let go of, to release control. And my question I want you to ponder is, where do you need to release control? Maybe it's the outcome with work. Maybe it's the future financially for you. Perhaps it's a relationship that you're struggling with. Perhaps even it's in your mindset, your own peace. But today God is asking you. Some of us, we're tight-gripped. Our hands are on the wheel. We're white-knuckling our lives. And God is saying to you, I want you to release control to me. You can't receive help until you release control. You're not going to be able to be free from this worry and anxiety until you let it go. See, peace comes as we release control back to God. Your hope that you're looking for is in the release. It's in letting go. And this weight that you've been carrying, when you make space on the weight, you can make space for God to come in and grab with you to help you carry what you've been carrying. And the encouragement that Peter gives to us, go back to this last verse, is the reason that you can release control to God is because He cares about you. That's good news, friends. That the sovereign, gracious God of the universe cares about every struggle you have, every worry, every fear. And He is asking you today to release it into His hands. This week, I want to encourage you to take your hands out, to start your mornings, 10, 15 minutes in the morning, to take your hands out and release control. Just put your hands down. Maybe even right now you could do this. To say, I'm releasing control. I'm releasing control of worry. I'm releasing control of fear. I'm releasing control of my future, and I'm going to surrender to God's help. Release control, receive help. Release control, receive the gracious God of the universe, His help that He wants to give to you. Today you can make that decision. You can release control. I was driving down the road last couple weeks ago, and I felt so clearly from God this whisper into my heart. And God said to me, Andy, you know, you can trust me more than you're trusting me right now with this church. You can trust me more than you've been trusting me with the future. And it was like this very clear, loving, gracious rebuke of my soul to bring me back, to remind me. It's all God's. He started this thing. He's going to finish this thing. He's faithful. That's the good news for you today. You can trust him more than you're trusting him right now, but you got to let go. And as I did this, I began to see God do some things that are phenomenal. In fact, he reminded me that he is still building his church in the midst of this season. And that led into us as a staff doing baptisms together. And we celebrated last week a moment of baptism. We had 46 people at all 4 of our campuses get baptized, spread across all campuses. And it's a good reminder that even in the midst of the season when we don't have control, we can't gather physically into a building, but the church is not canceled. The ministry is still open and moving forward. And there's several of these phenomenal stories that really impacted me. And right now, as we finish up our moment together, we're going to have a moment of generosity. I want to remind you that as you give today, that your generosity, God is using that generosity for stories like what we look at right now. First of the stories I want to share with you is this young girl who's 6 years old who lives in my household. Her name is Karis Joy, my daughter. And she kept begging us to get baptized. And for close to a year now, every time we do baptism, she said, Dad, can I get baptized? Dad, can I get baptized? Well, she took the plunge last week, all in for Jesus. And this baptism was one of the greatest number of response with children that we've had. I want to say thank you to all of you who continue to work with our kids and our students and next gen. God's using your lives to make a difference in future generations. And I'm so proud of our students, our kids, my daughter, who made this phenomenal decision to go public with their faith in Jesus. He's on the move with the next generation. I'll give you a couple more stories to encourage you as we give today, that these are the stories. This story right here comes from Roxanne. She started coming to Echo recently, going to the Fremont campus, got involved in Alpha Fremont. She grew up Catholic. She really hadn't connected for a while. Her boyfriend brought her back to church, to Echo. She fully surrendered her life to God. She got baptized last week with our baptisms. She's all in. She's making a decision to surrender everything that she is to God. One other story here is Melinda. She is from Brazil. I'll show you her picture here in the next one. And Melinda, she actually has had cancer. She is a survivor right now, but it's continuing to spread. She's had it for multiple years, a rare form. For her to even come out, her system is compromised. So that's why for her, this was a very big decision. In Brazil, one of the cool things that they do is they throw roses when people make the decision to get baptized. And so you can see here her boldness, her courage to say, I'm all in for Jesus. God is moving. He's changing lives. He's transforming people's eternal destinies. And he's doing it through you and through your generosity. So as you give today, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for trusting God with your resources and believing that the things that are in our hands, that we can release control to God. And I wonder even today, for some of you, this would be the day that you would start releasing control of your finances to join with God in this mission to make a difference together. Others of you, before we wrap up our time together, maybe your next step is not generosity, but it's to surrender to God. I want to invite you right now, in this moment, if you've never fully released control of your life, to follow Jesus, to take that step. By faith in what Jesus has done on a cross, you can yield control of your life to him. By faith in his resurrection, you can surrender right now. If that's you, will you pray this prayer with me? Father, thank you for the fact that you sent your son to die on a cross for my sins, that you care about me, that you want me to know hope and experience life. And I pray that you today would forgive me for my past. Just tell him he will. He'll step in. I surrender control of my life to you in this moment. Thank you for new life. I pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. If you made that decision, just click on that button that shows up right there in the link. Let us know that you made that decision. Right now we're going to go into a celebration of baptism. If you've not yet chosen to let us know that you're here to check in, you can do that now while we're watching this video. Also, right now would be a great moment as you give to give, knowing that God is using your generosity to transform the lives of these people who took this bold step to be baptized last weekend. Let's watch together as we celebrate. Hey everybody, I'm Andy and you've been listening to the Echo.Church YouTube channel. I hope that you found today's content helpful. If you did, I want to encourage you to go ahead and subscribe so that you can get more helpful content as we put it out. Also, I want to say a special thanks to all of you who are contributing to the work of Echo.Church. Your contributions and generosity is helping us further the good news of Jesus and help more people. So thanks so much for considering making a donation or partnering with us. Go to Echo.Church/giving. Your generosity will further this ministry and help us impact more people. Thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again in the future for more messages to help you in your life spiritually.